Hello, I'm Hank Hill from the television program King of the Hill. Welcome to the 15th Annual Texas Tribune Festival. Now, I know a lot of you in here tonight probably have some very strong opinions, and that's great, but let's make sure to keep things respectful and civil. In this country, we have free speech, and everybody has the right to say what they want, even if their opinions are completely wrong and asinine. So remember, good manners and good behavior makes for a good festival for all. And I'll be standing by here just in case things get out of hand. So please be respectful of one another, no matter how pissed off you get. Thank you.
It is great to be back in Austin. Thank you.
I feel the same, but I have a feeling you're here for her and not for me. Hi, everyone. Welcome to your Saturday morning. I'm thankful we're doing this at 9 a.m. and not my usual 5 a.m., so this is a positive thing, but still you're spending your morning with me, and I appreciate that. Obviously, Senator Amy Klobuchar needs no introduction, and many of the topics that we're talking about today are probably the very things that you spent the last few weeks tracking on your phones or televisions. There is so much news, so we're going to dive right into it. So, Senator, I wonder if you can chart from January, when you took probably the most bizarre limo ride that I can ever imagine, being in the car with Trump and Biden on the way
Alone.
Alone. She lived to tell the tale, which is good, but I wonder if you can track us from there to where we are right now as a country. We're a nation actively grappling with, can this government function? Can we work together as Americans? Are we in a constitutional crisis? I mean, I wonder if you can just take us through your thinking about where we are in this present moment.
Sure. Thank you, Ali, and thank you, everyone, for being here at 9 a.m. I'm pretty impressed. My husband's also with me, right over there. And when I look at this last few months, I think everyone has just felt like a gut punch, probably almost every day. My husband's biggest gut punch was the bulldozing of the East Room. I got to say that first, because he will not stop talking about what that meant and where all the kids go through on the tours and the like. So when I go back to the beginning of that day of the inauguration, that was my job, by the way. I was in charge no matter who won. I was going to be in charge of that inauguration. It was a duty. I was chair of the Rules Committee. Planned it for months, no matter who won, Democrats, Republicans. And yes, I am the only one that has ever ridden alone in a car with Joe Biden and Donald Trump for 20 minutes. That, I think, that'll be for the next Texas Tribune Festival that I'll talk about.
That's history.
There was a lot of discussion there, but I had my 5 minutes or 4 minutes on the stage. I knew I was the only Democrat speaking, and I felt like I had to say something that would stand the test of time, because I did know we were heading into the darkest of dark times. I'll be honest, I don't think most people predicted there would be this much chaos, this much havoc across the board tariffs. So I said three things. Number one, that our democracy, and I still believe this, is, to quote Bob Dylan in this great music town of Austin. Let us note where Bob Dylan's from. Does anyone know? Minnesota. That's correct. So I quoted Bob Dylan. I love that movie, by the way. I quoted Bob Dylan that our democracy is a shelter in the storm, and that it is on us to uphold that democracy. You even being here today. The students I saw graduating from the LBJ campaign school yesterday, which was just this incredible group of young people, 9 of them are already running. That's a shelter from the storm. The second thing is that our presidential inaugurations, unlike some places, they're held in gilded palaces or executive office buildings in other countries. In the United States of America, the president's inauguration is held in the Capitol. And that is because we have 3 equal branches of government. And I know for so many, if you look at the last 9-10 months, one of my frustrations has been my colleagues being rubber stamps, not knowing their power, not knowing the power that even though they just hate these tariffs or they don't agree with something the president did, they're afraid and they keep going along with it. The Congress is still there, and on little baby steps like the tariff votes last week that Tim Kaine and Rand Paul and I led to overturn the Canadian tariff, it passed. But it is now sitting over in the Speaker of the House's candy jar with his 10% more expensive candy just sitting there waiting to be voted on. So that's second thing. Third thing I said was the power in the room. You remember the pictures from the rotunda that day, that the power in that room did not come from the people in that room, even though there were a bunch of billionaires standing there in front of the cabinet members. The power in that room comes from the outside. It comes from the 7 million people that showed up at those No Kings marches and the most peaceful protests we've ever had in the history of this country. It comes from the people who voted in the election, who decided, I'm going to want something different in Mississippi or in Georgia. And it comes from the young people who are still willing to put themselves out there, like the kids I saw yesterday, and run for office. So that has been my kind of, you need a North Star. I know I'm in the Lone Star State. We need a North Star, and for me, those 3 points have been my North Star. And when I look at what's happened, I see a president that appears to not have any bounds. He does not respect the Constitution, and I will note, in the end, Trump does not trump the Constitution. He does not really care if members of his own party say to him, oh man, this healthcare thing is bad in my state, it's too expensive. He doesn't even want to come to the table and negotiate. What he appears to want to do is every single day dominate the news. And he will do that for the most horrible things. You think his party wanted him to pardon George Santos? They didn't like George Santos. But he did it, and it dominated the news for 2 days. Do you think his party really wanted him to say, oh, I'm going to run for a 3rd term, or Bannon says it. Then 4 days later, Trump says, yeah, I'm going to run for a 3rd term. Headlines again.
Ultimately
then 4 days later, he says, no, I don't really think I can do that. So this is what they're messing around with and playing with people's heads. So it just makes me more committed than ever on this mission, that we have to have people's backs. That in the words of one of my mentors, Paul Wellstone from Minnesota, who we miss very much, politics is about improving people's lives. And when you go to work every day and think that, whether it means working with some of my Republican colleagues to get things done, or whether it means standing up to Donald Trump, that is what motivates me every day and what I hope motivates the people of this country as we head into the next year.
And so when you talk about, I think, that tenuous relationship, and there's so many topics you brought up that I want to dive deeper into, when you talk about that tenuous relationship, though, between the system of checks and balances in this country, the way that Trump at times has openly flaunted the U.S. Constitution, are you now of a mindset that we are in a constitutional crisis in this country?
I think what's holding us back by being in a full-blown crisis is actually the laws that we have in place, and I'm going back to Minnesota today to speak to a group of federal judges, motivate them, not political, but just about how important their role is right now. When you look at that, so let's start with that. So what are the checks, right? Congress and the courts. So when you look at the courts, obviously I don't agree with a bunch of the decisions the Supreme Court has made in the last year, but they still have right now in front of them this tariff case, which is key. One of your speakers at the Texas Tribune Festival was there. I was there for that case, but sitting behind me was John Mulaney. I mean, don't ask. He's funny, but tariffs aren't. And that moment where you listen to those justices ask questions, like Justice Gorsuch, very conservative, saying, wait a minute, it's the power of the Congress to assess taxes. I don't know that the administration can just make that decision. Or Justice Roberts saying, well, who's paying for these tariffs? Isn't it the people out there? Isn't it the people of America that are paying for these tariffs? And Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, and Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, was like six people down from me in the same row. And every time one of the conservative justices would question the tariffs. Now, just to be clear, this is like 70–80% of the tariffs are coming out of this statute called IEEPA. Or when Kagan would say, there's a lot of words in that statute, but there's one word that isn't, tariff. And so I would look down the row at them, and sometimes they looked at me, sometimes they avoided me, but I would always go, not going very well.
And they didn't respond.
And so anyway, but the point is, I don't know what they're going to do, but to watch that or listen to those questions gave you some faith that there are people looking at this. But what gives me more faith in that case is when the underlying court, which was the International Trade Court, 3 judges, one appointed by Obama, one appointed by Trump, and one appointed by Reagan. Yes, they still exist. Those 3 judges, they unanimously said it was illegal. Or you look at some of the other cases about immigration or some of the other constitutional violations that have occurred, you see judges even appointed by Donald Trump standing up. So I just refuse to give up on that part. Second, democracy. You have seen right in this state a violation of what I consider representation, which is this gerrymandering. And so what happened there, which I think no one would have predicted, another state, California, with Governor Newsom, stands up and says, you know what, if you're going to mess around, we're only going to do this for a short period of time, because we like the way our non-gerrymandering, nonpartisan commission works here. But we're going to respond. We're not going to let you take our democracy away because what we're doing. The legislators, Democratic legislators standing up in Texas to put a national focus on this issue was so important. The election itself, we have a decentralized election system, which is really, really important. So when you look at what happened, and I know in the news cycle it feels like it was a year ago. What was it, like 10 days ago?
About that,
Come on, guys, like look at it. Where people stood up and said, well, this isn't just the polls saying that Donald Trump is now in the 30s with Democrats and independents, or in the low 40s. He's leading with Republicans as of Monday, an AP poll showing him down 13 points with Republicans. So what happened in that election? It wasn't just Virginia and New Jersey. In Georgia, the first non-federal offices that are statewide for these public service commissions went Democratic, 2 of them. Or what happened in Mississippi, where they blew up the supermajority by having 2 Senate races that these candidates had fought hard to win, and they did. And my favorite little example, this was happening everywhere. John and I, at the invitation of Congressman Crow in Colorado, I did the Arapahoe County dinner this summer. And I just thought, well, I'll check base, because when you do these things, you meet all these candidates that are zealously running for mayor and city council, and then you take a picture, and then you say, well, you know, are you an incumbent? No, there's an incumbent, every single one of them, and giving the speech, kind of thinking, I hope one of them wins, you know, this is cool. Every single one of those cities flipped. The mayors flipped, the city councils flipped. And so my point of this story is, when you asked Ali about democracy and where it stands, I just look at these proof points. I look at, despite everything with Donald Trump literally trying to, this assault on our laws by pushing through the gerrymandering, by demanding it in Missouri, by splitting Congressman Cleaver's district up into 3 in Kansas City, when even the Chamber of Commerce is strongly against this. What is the response from the people of this country? They went out and they voted. What is the response from the courts? Not perfect. We don't agree with everything they do, but they have been in a number of cases, especially the lower courts, standing up. What is the response to Congress? I left the worst to last. But the response from Congress, because it is run by the president's party, has basically been to rubber stamp. So I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But we do see now that there are these moments, especially with the tariffs. Senate voted to overturn Brazil tariff, where he's helping out his friend, right? The Senate, yeah, let's just slap them with a 40% tariff, even though we have a trade surplus with them. Really? The Canada one I mentioned, and then just all the tariffs. So that's where the Senate really is, and there's a whole bunch of them afraid to vote that way, but agree. They say it behind closed doors. So my hope is that we're going to see more of this going forward. But if they refuse and they keep rubber stamping, we're just going to have to march through to the midterms and beat them.
And I think there's like one more tariff vote I think that's coming on something that's near and dear to my heart, which is coffee. So we'll get there when we get there.
Oh, well, coffee. Yeah.
that one's coming as well.
That.
I think
I noticed we don't have any coffee out here because it's 19% more expensive, but thank you.
I think it was that, just privately.
Well, now there's an exemption, which we'll get to that.
We'll get there. I think if we can double back and stay in Congress, because I've been logging way too many hours there alongside you, and then, of course, when the House finally came back in session after 40-plus days of being gone, I think many of us are coming here with questions about this Congress not keeping the government open and, in fact, earning historic plaudits for the longest government shutdown ever. I wonder your thoughts on how this deal ultimately came together, but then the other piece of it, too, which is the chatter that you and I think, pick up a lot of, which is the role of Senator Schumer, the current minority leader. My understanding was that he tried to bring more moderate members of your caucus on board with this strategy in the first place, seeing a potential leverage point on healthcare, trying to put it into the spotlight, holding the caucus together for as long as he could, and then ultimately, as the deal was coming together after Election Day, realizing he could not hold these moderates back anymore from changing their votes. I mean, I wonder if you think that the conversation around the need for a new leader has any real teeth to it.
Yeah, okay, that's a lot. Okay, I'm gonna step back a bit. So we were confronted with this budget moment where we have few moments of leverage right now. As I've explained to you, they run the White House, they run the Senate, and they run the House. And there's a lot of things we could have focused on, but we decided as a caucus, as a team with Senator Schumer's leadership, to focus on healthcare, because that was what we were hearing the most from our constituents. It's really that plain and simple. We were also hearing about grocery costs. We were also hearing about electricity costs. And the whole affordability issue is a promise that Donald Trump made to not just the whole country, to my constituents, 10% of whom voted for me and for him. So I know a little bit about this. They wanted him to bring costs down. So as we head into the fall, and in fact costs are going up and inflation is even higher than the Federal Reserve target, where manufacturing jobs have gone down for every month since he came president, except we don't know this month because they refused. Okay, we're not going to go into that. So that's kind of where we were. And the health care was just banging on our door. Why? The Affordable Care Act plans, 75% of the holders of those plans, people that use them, are in states that Donald Trump won. And number one is Florida. Do you know what number two is? Texas. And it's so many small business owners. It is so many farmers, 27% of farmers and ranchers on these plans. So we, of course, wanted to stop their Medicaid cuts from this summer and the messes that they had created, but really focused on this issue because it was immediate. The plans, the marketplace opened on November 1st. So we put that out there that we wanted to see some changes on healthcare. I got to say, we thought, given what we could see with where the public was, that they'd meet us somewhere in the middle, that they'd figure out a way to do it. And time went on, and as we're saying, come to the negotiating table, and the Speaker of the House is leaving the House out at home and refusing to bring them back. And, we are looking around there, and there's not one person there. As I noted on Halloween, the most haunted place to go that you didn't want to go into at all was the chamber of the House of Representatives.
Well, you're a senator. You'd always say that.
No, because 6 weeks before, 200 representatives had disappeared disappeared and we've never seen them again, so don't ever go in there. So that's what happened. We were actually pretty shocked that they didn't want to come to the table. We were in good faith proposing something that was really pretty practical, moderate suggestion. So they wouldn't negotiate with us, kept going, and so number one, this is how I look at this whole shutdown as we go forward, because rearview mirror, we stayed together, we put a highlight on an issue. Senator Schumer led our caucus through all of that. He did vote against, like I did, the ultimate deal because it didn't include anything on health care. But number one, Donald Trump wouldn't do anything for people's health care. He wouldn't even come to the table and sit with us and try to work this out. Number two, nor would the House of Representatives. Number two, he was willing to go so far as use hungry people and people stranded in airports that are just trying to get home to see their families as pawns. We gave him a moderate one-year extension, and he wouldn't even look at that. Instead, he was posting pictures of a marble bathroom in the White House. Literally multiple shots of chandeliers and sconces. He was holding Great Gatsby parties. This was his choice. And so the third thing that I believe, and I believe this in my heart, we will get this done. We will get this done either by forcing votes, which is about to happen, and there'll be more of them. We will get this done by getting it on some piece of legislation. But if they resist us week after week and month after month, we will march into the midterms and we will win the midterms and we will get this done. So that's my
But I think the other piece of this, right, is you have December coming where you have some kind of an Affordable Care Act vote, TBD on what it actually looks like, and then you have another funding deadline at the end of January. I mean, how do you, your colleagues, the Congress writ large, change the dynamics ahead of that January deadline, or are we just in for doing all of this pain over again?
Okay. So first of all, that vote will be determined by what we want to have in that vote.
Yeah.
So if they want to come to us and talk about some moderate reforms or something like that, you know, we'd be happy to talk to them about that if that is going to bring them over to get their vote. Or we can just say we want to make these tax credits permanent and we go from there. I'm just not hanging everything on this vote based on how they've been acting. I can't help it.
But also in large part because it won't pass, right?
Right. So, and yeah, good point, yes. Schoolhouse Rock, got to go over to the House. But the issue here is just why would this change at all? I was just in the northernmost part of Minnesota, like as far away from Texas as you could get, on the Canadian border, where we had, by the way, the most beautiful northern lights I've ever seen. Gave you hope in humanity to look up there and see those northern lights and just what the possibilities at that moment seem endless. And then I looked down at my phone and saw the latest from Donald Trump, but okay. So I went on an 8-county tour. I visit all 87 counties every single year in my state, and these were my last 8. And to a T, when I went to these farmhouses, cattle ranchers, soybean farmers, when there wasn't a reporter there, sorry, Ali, and they could really tell their stories. I mean, it's an unbelievable thing. People who looked at these premiums now in Texas, by the way, they're going up triple. That's what you're going to see in Texas. And they're like, well, that's like $500 more a month. That's like $3,000 more a year. That's like $6,000 more a year. And I just can't afford that. And so they're looking at junk plans that they don't really know are going to work, that are catastrophic only, that they will still have to pay for all their kids' stuff. Everything, little thing that happens. And I'm looking at this 8-year-old sitting there, and you know, what is he going to do? Like not play sports because he doesn't want to break his ankle? Because how much is that going to cost their family? Those are the kinds of things that are going through the minds of families right now. So I believe there's going to be so much pushback that they're going to have to do something on health care. I wish I could tell you what it was right now. But I don't think things are necessarily going to stay static. You just saw where he announced these exemptions to the tariffs after saying it was a national security issue for our country. I guess that we have to pay more for coffee. I don't know. And so now he still does that. So they have he has shown, for whatever cynical reasons, that he does flip policy sometimes. So we'll see what they do on health care. But right now, there will be negotiations going on in the Senate about these appropriations bills, blah, 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 blah. But there's a whole bunch of us that are going to keep this focus on health care and on costs and making things better for the people we represent.
I will say, even just from my perspective, as someone who's covered Trump now for over a decade, given the fact that he's sort of, I would say, policy agnostic, he reads the political winds more than he reads the policy papers, I think. It was surprising to me the way that he did not come to the negotiating table on the ACA. Just
Mr. Art of the Deal.
Well, just simply because of the number of his own voters that would be impacted by these spikes. I mean, the fact that we are now seeing Marjorie Taylor Greene have the president tweet against her. Oops. What upside down are we in? But also, what does that tell you? And what do you hear privately from your Republican colleagues? I've heard about a dozen of them want to do something on this, but what holds them back from taking that from private to public even?
Mm-hmm. Well, he is a strong man, and she clearly has been poking at him in a really public way. And really, when it comes to these plans, telling the truth. As I noted, 75%, no one has argued against this statistic, 75% of the people that get these policies are in places that he won. And I will note people who work at big corporations, they have health care, and that's good. People who work for government, local, state, federal, they have health care. But it is actually these small entrepreneurs who have so little reserves to begin with, that maybe have 10 employees or have 1 employee or on their own or are out there with a small farm, that rely on these policies. And that's what Marjorie Taylor Greene, I just love quoting her, that's what she understood as she looked at her district, as she looked at her state. And maybe she thought he would also come to the table because he's boasted about being engaged in the art of the deal, and then she decided not to back down. And I think for those of us, as someone that, like last Congress, had the most bipartisan bills of anyone in the Senate and has been able to work across the aisle, I look for those moments too. But the way I look at our politics right now, there are moments where you can still find ways to work with people and compromise, and you can't stop doing that, or democracy will, fail to exist in my mind. But you also have to find those moments to stand up. And I think one of the things that keeps me going, as I mentioned, the people running for office, but it's also the people that have been willing to stand up when that line is crossed, right? The law firms that have been willing to stand up, some of the universities that have stood up. But my favorite example of someone standing up is actually not Marjorie Taylor Greene. I know that surprises you. But it's this guy early on who was a federal prosecutor named Hagan Scotton, and he's a decorated war veteran. He clerked for Justice Roberts. He clerked for Judge Kavanaugh before he was Justice Kavanaugh, well respected in conservative circles. And he was asked by the Pam Bondi Justice Department to stop the prosecution and withdraw the prosecution of Eric Adams. And he wrote this letter that is really worth looking at if you want inspiration. And he said, "You may find a fool or a coward to file your motion, but it was never going to be me." So that is the kind of moment when we look at the possibility of working with people and finding that and waiting for them to come to the right place. You have to also look at the people who are standing up, and it's some combination in everyone's soul to do both, just like citizens have the same thing, right? You have to decide, well, I really disagree with this neighbor, man, but are you going to not try to talk to them anymore? Are you going to not work with them anymore? Or someone at your workplace, you find some way to do it, and then maybe one day they're ready to have a conversation about how, they can't afford their groceries, or things have gotten so expensive for their kid, or blah, blah, blah. You find a way to talk to them. And so I figure that's our job too.
I think we see, unfortunately, less and less of that, but you are, I think, right to point out that you are someone that I often think of when I hear of bipartisan negotiations to say, okay, where is Amy Klobuchar in this? Because you are someone who's often extending that hand. I want to button up Congress news by just asking you this. I mean, the idea of who is going to lead Senate Democrats. Senator Schumer can't stay forever. We don't know what he's going to do in 2026, but his number two, Dick Durbin, is retiring. Who do you think is the next best person to lead? Not now, maybe not in the next 2 years, but is that you? Is it someone else?
Okay, this is really up to our caucus to decide, and it is quite a way off in political terms. It's a long way off. And right now we have one job, and that is, despite having people from so many different, ours is a big tent party, and we are not rubber stamped, so we have differences sometimes of opinions. And that's why this was, despite how people, I did not agree with the bill that we had to vote on last week, but in the end, our job is to stay united, and I believe we will do this, on what really matters to people. And we can have different views on tactics and strategies and things like that, but that is really our job. And when I look at going into this next election, and I look at what some of these states are that are getting hit by these tariffs and all this chaos, states like Iowa, states like North Carolina, states like Texas, and I look at that people can't even get someone to answer the phone at Social Security, because it isn't just cost, it's cost, corruption, and chaos. Easy 3 words to remember, nice alliteration. Cost, corruption, and chaos, because the costs we talk about some, and maybe we'll talk about the tariffs. The chaos is the fact that things are just running amok in so many of these agencies, and even once we get beyond the, and I had breakfast with Pete yesterday after he did his session here, and we were talking about like air traffic controllers. Even if we get beyond that shutdown, the fact that they have encouraged people to take early retirement, or they haven't recruited people for these jobs, is just going to make it very difficult. USDA people in the ag areas in Texas and in Minnesota that help farmers get their loans and the like, you'll have offices that are just being shuttered because there's no one to fill them. And then you add to that the corruption of, deciding to pardon all his buddies and be able to give money to his friends, whether it's in Argentina or whether it's the decisions about the tariffs in Brazil. This is very corrupting to a country, and there are a lot of people that believe that, as Barbara Jordan, a very famous Texan representative, once said, that what the American people want is simple. They want a country as good as its promise. And there are still a lot of people that believe in that promise, and that's why his coarse and callous actions are just going against the grain of what people really believe in when it comes to America.
I think, the other theme that we have touched on time and again here, even just in the last half hour, is the idea of cost of living and affordability. I think that was so central, of course, to what we saw, I don't know, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, whenever the election was, New Jersey, Virginia, but also in New York. And I think what I kept thinking about throughout that period was, here is one central issue that we are watching the big tent of Democrats all message to success on, whether it was Zohran Mamdani in New York, who had a different way to talk about affordability than certainly Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger. But I wonder, when you look at those election results, A, what can Democrats take going forward into 2026 across the map? And B, how does the party turn this away from a conversation of left sniping against left, of who the right kind of Democrat is, and instead embrace the idea that the only way you're really taking back the House or having a shot at the Senate is if you let all Democrats be whatever brand of electable Democrat they need to be to win where they are?
Mm-hmm. I think the answer is having a core mission and looking out for people. And it's the exact opposite of what Donald Trump has been doing. So when I look at those candidates, very different philosophies, different policy ideas, from Mamdani to Abigail Spanberger, okay? But what they had in common is that they brought people with them. they actually were able to show people not only is Trump bad, that was, our job this year is to really shed a light on that and every day put on our warrior suit and explain what's going on. But there's another piece of this, and that is to show people that when we have the keys to the car, what's going to happen. And those candidates gave people that hope. And I do want to just say a little bit about Mikey and Abigail. I campaigned for both of them in New Jersey and in Virginia. And they are the most extraordinary women when you think about their background. So when you think about their lives, Mikey goes to the Naval Academy, one of the first women to do that. She ends up as a helicopter pilot. It's very difficult at the time to get helicopter pilots, a really very difficult job. She takes that on. And Abigail goes on to be in our intel services and do all this really tough work. So at this moment where people are a lot of us depend on them to do those jobs, they say, I guess to quote Isaiah, send me. Then when their military career, they've excelled. There's these red seats. This is during the last Trump administration, and people try to recruit them to run, and they say, we haven't had a Democrat in this seat in New Jersey or Virginia for a long time. They again say, send me. Then when it comes to now, and they're doing really well in Congress, both of them, they're friends, and people recruit them to run statewide because governors are so important right now, they again say, send me. And they go on to lead the tickets in their states. And I say this because a lot of people say, can women run in politics? Can women win? I like to point out that Nancy Pelosi beat Donald Trump every single day, but can women run? And these women led their tickets and won all these legislative races throughout their states, and somehow are such super candidates that between them they have 7 children. This is true. One has 4, one has 3. I just use those examples right now because we are in a bit of a macho time in our politics. I don't know if you noticed. And to see these women lead like they've won is truly inspiration. So I would say it's a combination of, yes, a core mission on affordability, meeting voters. People are sick of Trump. They want to have a check and balance. They're voting. But you also have to look at these stellar, incredible candidates that were able to carry not just their own race, but everyone along with them.
Yeah, the margins and the coattails, I think, have been stunning. You're sitting with me, and you and I have spoken for a book about why we haven't elected a female president yet, so you knew I was going to ask you something like this. But I've been wondering if these candidates were named Abe Spanberger and Mike Sherrill, if we wouldn't be flooded with a series of op-eds and columns about how they should be the next president, and of course, this is the way of the party forward. Does it strike you that way as well in this macho time, as you call it?
Well, I just think there's a lot of, and this is now we're going to the Wayback Zone, when I was running for president, and it was Elizabeth Kamala, me, and it was a lot of people just think when they see Donald Trump, now, news alert, he won't be on the ballot again, but they just think that you have to somehow match him and be like him and somehow have the same way of acting. And I just think that Abigail and Mikey's election show that that's not true. They weren't obviously running one-on-one with Donald Trump, but they were running with the shadow of Donald Trump on them all the time. And I also think that it continues to be hard to run as a woman. As you point out, if it was so easy, we could play a parlor game, name your favorite woman president. You can't. So it's somehow defied our country, and it's based on a lot of different things, I think, that including the actual status of those elections. But when you look at other countries, you've had women get elected who have done an incredible job and are popular, and I'm not going to start naming different countries, but this has happened. So to me, I tried, as I did yesterday with Kay Bailey Hutchinson, she and I took the stage together. I was thinking, man, I miss her in there. And talked about these young women running for office, and that just because we're at this Donald Trump macho time in our politics, that we need them to do that. because the more we have women in jobs like mayor jobs and in the military leadership and in police chiefs and things like that, it just sets an example for the next little girl to think anything and everything is possible. We were also able, by the way, to tell a bunch of somewhat hilarious stories. It's worth looking at this video if you can find it, about what it was like. One of my favorite ones was when I first started in the Senate. And I had been the DA, I'd managed an office of 400 people, and there I am, I'm on the elevator. They have those senator-only elevators so you can get quickly to your vote or something. And I'm on there alone with my staff member. Now this is, you're gonna find interesting, who's like 29 years old. Jake Sullivan, who ends up being Biden's national security advisor. So we're two on this elevator, and the door opens, and a male senator, who I will not go, no longer there, looks in, so I have the witness of Jake Sullivan to this, and says, "Hey," and I've been there 6 months, there's only 100 of us. "This is a senators only elevator." And Jake looks at him and points at me and says, "She is a senator." The guy gets all red, and he's just standing there, and I look at him, of course knowing who he is, and I go, "But who are you?" And then he's so stunned that the door just closes and he doesn't get on the elevator. So we just need more women on the elevator, that's all.
It feels like that's the moment where you should put like the Curb Your Enthusiasm music over the elevator door closing, right? I mean, it's just too perfect. Look, I mean, it's stories like that that just only reemphasize the idea that when women run, they're electable if you vote for them, right? I mean, like, that's the plain and simple truth.
We went from this thing I did yesterday, this last thing I'll say, but 1975, Lady Bird Johnson started this international conference on women. It's, they're out of office. She does this thing, big deal. Barbara Jordan is there. You've got the Ann Richards coming up, like all this cool stuff going on in Texas. So she starts that. So in 1975, there were 0 women in the U.S. Senate when this started, and 16 in the House. And so now we have well over 100 in the House, but there's only 26 women in the Senate still. But it's making, we've clearly made some improvements. And I was on Trevor Noah's show back when he had the show a few years ago, and I was pointing out that in the history of the Senate, there's been 2,000 men, 2,000 men, and now it's like 60 women. And he, without missing a beat, he says, "Well, if a nightclub had numbers that bad, they'd shut it down." And so we know the improvements we need to make on so many levels, but the only way we do it is to not have people lose hope that they can make changes in the democracy. And I still believe they can, and Tuesday's election results, I think, really made people feel like, hey, there change is afoot and I can do this.
So I think as we stay kind of in election realm, I know you and I have like 10-ish more minutes, and then we'll hear from some of the audience questions. But as you look ahead into 2028 and you see, a quiet shadow primary forming even in 2025, what do you think your party is looking ahead to, and what you want your party to be known for?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, I think it'll be very healthy if we have a robust primary. I think that's a good thing. I think that really sort of separates out people, and you can see who strong candidates are, and voters are going to be so focused on this to make decisions about who that candidate should be in a presidential election. And I think what we're going to be looking for is someone that's going to carry the hearts and minds of the American people, someone who's actually going to get results, get things done, and then, of course, someone who can win. To me, again, this agenda, this idea that we're going to put some novel things. So I would list these things. I would say, first of all, we've talked about affordability and figuring out this trade issue so it works when we've got so many potential customers outside our border. My state's 4th in ag exports, so I get this. 20% of what farmers and ranchers make is exported, or that was before Trump. Now it's like, I don't know. So looking at that and how we get a policy that's going to work for America. Looking at housing and workforce and childcare. So the way America has always worked and worked well is that we have brought in people from other countries that work at, whether it's work on our farms, work in our hospitals, or start companies and the like. It's amazing numbers. Nearly half of our Fortune 500 companies were started by immigrants or kids of immigrants. We have got like nearly half of our Nobel Prize winners in science since 2000 from the US were immigrants. So while I believe strongly and have voted this way for a secure border, immigrants don't diminish America, they are America. So getting a policy that works on that front for our country with putting some smart things in place on immigration reform, I think would be a big thing that we need to do. And if you didn't notice in this last election, Hispanic voters started voting with us in a big, big way again. Okay, third thing is just housing and childcare. Housing and childcare to me means a good workforce. You can't go to work if you don't have a place to bring your kid. And there's all kinds of novel things going on right now with childcare. We've got in Minnesota, they've taken in rural areas where it's just childcare deserts, they've taken old real estate buildings and converted them into pod childcares. Or the county has maybe taken a building, they said, if we're done wrong, we're going to make this senior housing. But they've allowed 12, 15 kids, small businesses to move into those places because maybe they can't run it out of their apartment anymore. Other businesses have joined forces, like 200-person businesses, to expand private existing. Bigger businesses like Hormel on the Iowa border, Marvin Windows on the Canadian border, actually expanding into huge childcare. So I just think there's incentives and things we could put in place on that front that makes it more affordable. On housing, looking what our rules are, trying to make it easier to build housing, figuring out how we can build like more things in towns, mid-sized towns, so that the existing housing stock opens up for families. Those are exciting things to me. Dealing with technology. I have the scars from taking on tech, and I love tech. I love the fact that this is a tech town with a whole bunch of startups, but I do believe you need guardrails in place, and that includes on AI. The fact that we have not passed one bill. Senator Thune and I, the majority leader, have a bill that we're going to reintroduce again that at least sets some standards for non-defense uses of technology for some of the higher risk things like electricity grids and criminal justice and the like, so we can at least get some standards in place. The fact that we don't even have anything to protect people's identities. I myself was a victim of this with a hearing that, get this, Marsha Blackburn and I did a great hearing on privacy laws, and they took that hearing with my own staff sitting behind me and turned it into me saying all kinds of vulgarities that I won't say now or they'll put it out on the internet. And as part of the Sydney Sweeney ad campaign, don't even ask, okay? But it went viral all over the internet, and we got Meta to put created by AI, which was helpful. TikTok took it down, and X wouldn't do one thing. The fact that we do not have rules in place to protect citizens' identities and their voices is going to breathe the ruin of us protecting intellectual property unless we pass the No Fakes Act that a number of us have on a bipartisan basis, protect democracy by making sure people know what candidates they're voting for, doing more on voting rights. I think there is a whole grouping of issues where we have to come out with some novel ideas with how we really structure the U.S. government. Now that Trump has torn down so many norms, we have to come out with our own ideas as a party. So a lot of this is going to be, which most citizens are aware of, by doom scrolling, yelling at the TV, by the way, he won't answer, and then having candidates that are really going to step forward with an agenda where people are going to not just hear rhetoric, they're going to believe that change is afoot, and healthcare.
Do you want to be one of those candidates again? I'm asking selfishly.
I, like everyone else, anyone who is responsible right now in leadership is focused on one thing, and that is the midterms. I can't even, and especially when you're in the U.S. Senate and you see these possibilities of winning these states and creating a check and balance on Donald Trump, that is what I'm focused on now. I'm third in leadership in the Senate, and I have a real ability to influence some of this, so that's what I'm focused on.
Selfishly for my travel, having done this with you once before, I was looking behind me only because I didn't know if they wanted to start or if you wanted me to ask. Yeah? Okay, sure.
All right, hello everyone. My name's Emily Hood. I'm with the Texas Tribune. Thank you all for being here and submitting your questions. First comes from Emily from Dallas. Can Democrats win the Senate?
Yes. No, I was in North Carolina with Governor Cooper recently, who's our candidate there, and these states, again, I'm going back to these healthcare plans and the work that has to be done on this front, they're just thirsting for leadership. This is a state where Senator Tillis had stepped down, decided not to run, he was very blatant about it because he and Donald Trump were at complete odds over what had to be done on health care and the big, beautiful betrayal of a bill when it came to Medicaid cuts and the like. And when I went on that trip, by the way, I also did something with Senator Tillis at Davidson College, like a bipartisan thing, which was kind of like this. So when I see these kinds of things, change is on the way. Iowa, Joni Ernst deciding not to run. In Maine, incumbents' numbers way down. In Alaska, same thing. In Texas. So I'm just looking at in Ohio, where Sherrod Brown has decided to run again, which is really excited. When you look at Sherrod, he always had this, and still does, has this canary in a coal mine pin. To signify his mission in life. When I'm talking about mission in life, what matters when it comes to candidates, because of course my grandpa was an iron ore miner, but in Ohio they have a lot of coal mining, and the canary in the coal mine was the symbol that if it was dangerous, the canary would die before those miners went down there. And so he wears that to remember why he got to the job he has and what he's supposed to do, and looking out for workers and the dignity of work in his words. So I just think when we look at these candidates and you look at what's happening, a lot of people focused on the House, totally get it. I saw Representative Doggett last night. I mean, they're very, very focused on what's happening in the House, as well as Sylvia and many other great members of Congress here out of Texas. But do not overlook the Senate, because, get this, 5 more votes in the Senate and Pam Bondi would not be Attorney General of the United States. The Saturday Night Live did a reenactment of the hearing we had with her when she yelled at everyone. And while I was amazed that they found someone, Ashley Padilla, who found a scarf that was identical to mine to play me, not to mention she's 32 years old, so I very much enjoyed that. What I'm most amazed was that I realized I trusted Amy Poehler as Attorney General more than Pam Bondi. So that 5 more votes, Pam Bondi wouldn't be in. 4 more votes, and they wouldn't have decimated the Consumer Protection, the Financial Protection Bureau. 3 more votes in the Senate, and we would have saved the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. 3 more votes in the Senate, and RFK Jr. would not be heading up our healthcare system. 2 more votes in the Senate, and Kash Patel would not be FBI director. 1 more vote in the Senate, and they would not have passed the betrayal of a budget bill this summer that gave a bunch of billionaires $2 trillion and multimillionaires and big companies all these tax cuts, and it's going to be on the shoulders of a debt for our young people. So when I look at this and I think about the Senate, yeah, every vote is going to count in the Senate.
Can I just quickly ask about Georgia? Yeah. What you think about Georgia? I mean, I heard you list a bunch of other battleground
Georgia,
states.
yeah, thank you. So I was looking at the ones that we can take that aren't open. So Georgia, John Ossoff is incredible candidate, leader. The governor there, Governor Kemp, decided not to run, which was kind of a remarkable thing and shows what's going on right now in our politics. And I think John Ossoff is doing so well there. He's been such a leader, inspiring person. So I predict he wins. The other two are Michigan and Minnesota. I'm sure Mark Warner would want me to mention Virginia, but he's doing pretty well there, and Hickenlooper in Colorado. But the Michigan and Minnesota, they're both primaries with good candidates. And I believe, given what Donald Trump has been doing to our states when it comes to the economy, the scary nature of this economic chaos that we're in right now, that we will win those states.
Jackson from New Braunfels asks, when do you predict the Senate will vote on the Epstein files and why?
Well, how did we forget this?
There was so little time. It's kind of a question of if you guys are
where
going
is
to vote on
our
them, right?
ace reporter that asked about the Epstein files so we can thank him? He must be out there somewhere. Where are you? All right, so this is highly relevant right now because, as you know, Trump was so scared of getting those Epstein files out there that he literally kept that house out, as I mentioned earlier, for a 7-week vacation. And now thinking something would change. And it didn't change. In fact, I think they got more interested in getting the Epstein files out there. 2 reasons this is relevant, and then I'll get to the process. One is that transparency matters. This is something that clearly a lot of Republicans have been pushing forward to have these released, and it needs to be released for public trust's sake at this point. They have no idea what's in those files. The second reason is that, to me, politically, this is another promise that they made to their own people. They promised they were going to bring down costs. They haven't. They promised they're going to release the Epstein files. They haven't. They promised all kinds of things of what was going to be this great moment for America, and it certainly hasn't been. So that's why I think these things are two reasons are relevant politically. As for the process, the House is supposedly going to vote next week, I think on Tuesday.
Yeah.
I think you'll see a very strong vote in the House. Then it moves over, and all the Democrats will support releasing, and a good chunk of the Republicans. So where does it go next? My workplace. So it goes over to the Senate, and I just find it, so they need to get 13 Republicans in addition to all the Democrats to vote for it. So you have people who are up for office, people who actually think they should be released, conservatives that have been pushing for it to be released, just like you have in the House. So I suppose the Majority Leader Thune, could decide to sit on it, but I think it's going to become a complete public outcry if he does it. Okay, let's say it passes in the Senate, then what happens? The president would have to sign it into law. Oops. So I think that will also create a lot of pressure on the White House on this if they're only thing standing. And as you know, we can override a veto, right, with 2/3. So that's why watching these numbers and seeing what's happened with who votes is going to be really important as we go ahead. And now they're trying to somehow turn this on what Democrats are on the file. I'm looking at all this, and they're investigating this and that. I'm like, seriously? Why don't you just release the files? And that will answer all your questions.
Lana from Dripping Springs asks, are you concerned about how the influence of Charlie Kirk's movement on young voters could affect the outcome of future elections?
Okay, well, first of all, his death was a complete tragedy. I just know how we had just been through this in Minnesota, as all of you know, with my good friend Melissa Hortman, the former Speaker of the House, being gunned down. And then we had in our state the Annunciation shooting through those beautiful stained glass windows at that church with these kids, literally their own friends, 12-year-olds laying on top of 6-year-olds, teachers throwing kids in wheelchairs who had severe disabilities under a church pew to save their lives. And then to go into the Charlie Kirk assassination sort of brought it all back for all of us. So the first thing that you see in all these is getting emergency help in the cases in Minnesota. In the case in Utah, it's tracking down the murderer who did this. And in all those cases, that did occur. But then the next thing is to kind of step back and say, so what does this mean for our politics? And I think the first thing is, and I've said this at several hearings, having been through what happened in Minnesota, is, at their own peril, do people blame other people for what happened when you have literally people who have become maybe influenced by what they're reading online, maybe influenced by other things, get involved and just sit there. And I look at Uvalde, that mass shooting. I look at here in Texas. I look at what happened in Buffalo. And you have to step back and look at all of it and say, how do you prevent this from happening? And if I hope that there is an influence, the question is on young people, it's that we have to do something about guns. And that means there's not one thing fits all when it comes to guns. It is things like doing some better background checks. It is being willing to do something when it comes to assault weapons. I even suggested at our hearing with Kash Patel, knowing the politics, my state, like Texas, proud hunting state, and I always look at these things. My Uncle Dick used to be a deer hunter, and I think, did these proposals hurt my Uncle Dick in his deer stand? I say no. So even if you're not ready to go to an assault weapon ban, I raised the issue, which would have been the difference in Uvalde and in the Buffalo mass shootings, of if you put the age to 21 for the purchase of those guns. That is clearly a compromise effort, and something Matthew McConaughey, who, by the way, was just a hero after that tragic shooting, coming out to Washington, working with Democrats and Republicans. That was something that actually Manchin, who I know spoke here yesterday, was supported, was going up to age 21, because we've seen a vast number of these shootings, not all of them at all, involving people between the ages of, that if they turn 18 and then they get the assault weapon, which makes a lot bigger difference for deaths than having just a handgun or something like that. So I'm literally down in the weeds of figuring out what could we do, even though we know assault weapon ban is 70%, 80%. The public are with it, even though we know that closing these loopholes, which I think is even bigger possibility of something we could get done. I actually did the bill that said that once you're convicted, not charged, convicted of stalking, they can't go out and get a gun the next day. And I started that bill with just Mazie Hirono and me, okay, here we are. Then I got 10 more, then I got 10 more, then I got 10 more. And pretty soon, when there was that agreement worked out between some Republicans and Democrats, that was in there. So that's why I just believe that you can't just give up when things don't happen right away. And the last thing I'd say about the Kirk assassination and the assassination of my friend Melissa and her husband is that we need to bring people to talk together again. And that just seems impossible right now with how Donald Trump acts, but it can happen. That's part of what you have here with people coming here and bringing up new ideas. Kay Bailey Hutchinson and I on the stage together for an hour yesterday. We've got to model that behavior. When Melissa was shot down with her dog and her husband, her 2 kids, she was actually planning her son's wedding for this December. It was a joy of her life that after having these and still being in office and being so respected, that she had this joyful event coming up in her family life. And just a few days after she was murdered, her 2 kids came together and issued a statement, and they said, just remember in our mom and dad's lives to do something good. And they said, it doesn't have to be big, just talk to someone you wouldn't normally talk to, a stranger, plant a tree, pet a dog, hopefully a golden retriever, they said, and do something good for the world. And that's what's brought me through her horrendous death and all the things that followed after it, and those families in that church who've just stood by and say, we have a cause now and we're going to keep working on it. So that's what I hope comes out of this tragic summer of assassinations and political violence.
Senator, thank you. I continue to be so sorry for what you've experienced this summer, but I think you leave us on something of a hopeful note of the idea that we can leave this place better than we found it and better than it might be right now. And so I thank you for ending us there and for everything else that we've talked about. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. It was so fun. Thank you.
Thank you.